What would you do if God asked you to leave everything familiar behind and follow Him without knowing exactly where you were going? That was the challenge given to Abraham. Originally called Abram, Abraham lived in the ancient Near East when God called him to leave his country and family and journey to a land God would show him. God promised to make Abraham into a great nation, bless him, make his name great, and ultimately bring blessing to all the families of the earth through him. Abraham obeyed and traveled to the land of Canaan. But his journey of faith was not without struggles and mistakes. Abraham and his wife Sarah grew old without having the son God had promised. At times, Abraham struggled to understand how God's promise could possibly be fulfilled. Sarah eventually gave her servant Hagar to Abraham, and Hagar gave birth to Ishmael. But God had not forgotten his promise. When Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, Sarah miraculously gave birth to Isaac, the promised son. Years later, Abraham faced one of his greatest tests when God commanded him to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. Abraham obeyed in faith, but before Isaac was harmed, God stopped him and provided a ram for the sacrifice. Abraham's life wasn't a story of a perfect man. It was the story of an imperfect man learning to trust a perfectly faithful God. His life teaches us that faith often requires moving forward before we can see the entire path. God's timing may be different from ours, and waiting can test our faith. But God's promises are not forgotten simply because their fulfillment takes longer than we expected. Abraham became known as a great example of faith, and God's covenant with him became central to the biblical story. What promise, prayer, or situation in your life requires you to trust God's timing even when you cannot yet see the outcome? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more Bible stories about faith, courage, and God's purpose.